Studio. Now, today is the first anniversary of the start of those unprecedented anti-government protests in Turkey. A few minutes ago, we were speaking to a journalist there in Taksim Square right now. Things are quiet at the moment. Large numbers of police with water cannon to try and enforce the ban on any kind of protest taking place to mark the anniversary. Meanwhile, the Turkish President Abdullah Gul is in the United States to attend his son Mehmet's graduation ceremony at Harvard University. And as you might expect, he gave an address, a talk, took some questions at the Harvard Kennedy School. One Turkish graduate student there, Emrah Altindis, was there as well, and he wanted to ask the president a question. Earlier, he told me what happened.
Today he gave a talk at Kennedy School, and I wanted to be there as a scientist, and I wanted to ask a question about Turkey's last 1 year and the ongoing police brutality and human rights violations. So this is the very brief summary of today.
So people listening will be familiar with this kind of thing, that it's a personal occasion, an academic occasion, I guess an occasion where he didn't really expect to be grilled about what's happening back at home.
Actually, he was not expecting such a question because it was such a great occasion for him. He was a proud father, and there was very politically correct questions. So last year, me and my 24 colleagues, including 4 Nobel laureates, we wrote an open letter to Science Journal, one of the most prestigious journals in our natural science area, about to protest and condemn ongoing police brutality in Turkey. So I started my question by referring to this letter that we published last year about Gezi protests and the people that we lost during this Gezi protests. I said one of the Gezi protesters were killed in the middle of the Istanbul, that's very close to where he lives. I said, don't you be ashamed to be a president of such a country?
And what kind of reaction did you get from the president when you're there in the midst of the kind of occasion you've described, telling him he should be ashamed of his role leading the country?
So I think he was shocked with this question because unfortunately in Turkey, the Turkish media is under a great pressure, especially in the last 10 years by this AKP government and this president. So none of the journalists in Turkey will be able to ask such a question. So he was shocked. And he first said, hey, you cannot ask me such a question. But this was also showing his mentality about democracy because you are a speaker in a university and I'm a scientist in this university. How come I cannot ask a question to a speaker? And his bodyguards were harassing me.
So I'm just trying to get the scene here, Emrah. You're in this gathering and you ask this challenging question of the president that he's not expecting, and he's shocked. And tell me more then about the reaction of the bodyguards. Did they come up to you?
While I was asking the question, they were actively trying to stop me to ask the question.
By doing what?
They could not.
But what were they doing to try and stop you?
They were yelling at me. They were saying, you cannot ask such a question. Ask your question. Try to be a human. Behave like a human. You are not a human being. So it was so strange for me.
What do you think they meant by that? Ask something easier.
If I would ask this question in Turkey in any university, I would be beaten. I would be arrested. And I would never be able to complete my question. So this is their general reaction, unfortunately. This is the democratic culture and atmosphere now in Turkey.
Did you ever get an answer?
He said the Gezi protests started with environmentalistic demands, but then after the second and third day, the illegal terrorist organizations in Turkey became a part of these movements, and then the police used some measures that they need to use. And he said he's sorry for 8 young men that we lost.
So that's Emrah's story, the Turkish graduate student at Harvard University who got to question the Turkish president unexpectedly. It's an interesting account.